We're back here at East Tagaña Bay and we're looking at Alupang Island, just where we left off in Partition 1. I grew up here and my brother Phil and I spent many hours playing in the waters, and I always wondered why it is that we never learn how to fish. And then when I interviewed my mother for her oral history, that's when I learned why. When my grandparents decided to come to Guam in 1946, it was at the invitation to become American citizens in the 1950 Organic Act. Unfortunately, Taza died in 1948 of a massive heart attack. My grandfather's name is Francisco Agon Flores, and my grandmother is Maria Pangilinan Flores. So my grandfather was not able to pass on any of his fishing knowledge to his sons. Mom said in her interview that Taza brought all his fishing tools with him, including the talayeru. And the reason for that was my grandparents were business owners in Saipan. And after the war, when they decided to come to Guam, Taza didn't know how long it would take to reestablish himself as a businessman. So he brought the fishing tools with him because he knew that by doing that, he could at least rely on the ocean to feed his family. My husband, Bob Steffi, is a fisherman. So because of the fishing influence that my husband has introduced to our children, I've always wanted to support the history of fishing, which is why we embarked on iPeskadót and iPesadót. And one of the things in discussion that came up is, where does the terminology talayeru come from? I called up Ross Hunter Anderson and Dave Tuggle, and they both said that there is no archaeological evidence of the net fishing. Dave said that Scott Russell had mentioned in his book, Iman Mufotna, that Fresnay mentioned it. I called Scott and said, hey, can you tell me where the reference is for talayeru? And he said that it was in Fresnay, and that Fresnay had introduced Luis de Torres. And we know that Luis de Torres was just a couple of generations after the conquest. So this oral history that was handed down was reliable, trustworthy, and therefore we know that the word talayeru derives from a Spanish word, ataraya. So from ataraya to talayeru, we have zoti, which was in the Fresnay account, lagwa zoti, which is to toss, and therefore that's what talayeru means, a throw net. It doesn't matter what the method is or how the method was introduced to us. The fact that we adopt a method and the fact that we continue to do it makes it the tradition. So fishing itself and the patti system is the tradition that is very Chamorro.
Net's my bag. Net fishing, any kind of net fishing, I'm there.
Well, I love all kinds of methods, but my favorite, which is because it's a skill, like it's talayeru.
The talayeru itself, always fascinated me how with one technique you can catch so many fish.
With talayeru fishing, it's a challenge, very challenging, because your net can only go so far, and you have to understand the fish's behavior when they're feeding, and many times they see the net coming when you're throwing, and you have to outsmart the school of fish that you're targeting.
No, talayeru is not Chamorro. It's imported from the Philippines. I've seen photos from the sketches from early 1900s. I'm sure it was since the Spanish era.
Would you define yourself as a talayeru?
As they say, for the local people and my family, they consider me a talayeru because I do the same concept, build the same concept as a fisherman that was descended down to me from my family tree clan.
I was 7 years old when I was going with my dad, casting nets, talayeru. I'll be his bagger, and we will walk the reef from like sometimes Fakpi Point to Yumarag village. At those times it's kind of hectic because we don't have any boats, so we get to be driven up to the overlook by Silla Bay, and we'll walk the trail down, and that's how we start fishing. If you have a talayeru, it is good, but you hardly cannot buy talayeru those days. You have to make it yourself.
This uncle of mine, Francisco Cruz San Augustine. They call him Familiar Pendant. And he was a fisherman, talayeru type of shore and reef fishing. And I followed him. You know, I mean, I used to follow him even when I was 10 years old, but I was mostly chuli guagua. But to really learn how to cast the net, I started learning at 12 years old.
A lot of people would love to be a fisherman. A lot of people would love to throw net. I said the first thing you must do if you want to be a talayeru is learn how to sew. Because if anybody can take a net and go out there and throw net, you know, anybody can learn how to fish. But when the time comes when you break the net, who's going to repair it? You've got to be an individual to be a fisherman and an individual to repair your nets.
When they started introducing the tataga here in the island, selling it, it's too expensive. Imagine you're going to buy tataga for $200 to $300. You don't know how to fix it when you broke it. That's why so many people are coming to my place, giving me the tataga they're taking to fix it for them.
There's Uncle Frank of mine, to Francisco Pendant, went up to the ranch. He started the very top one, which is the Copo area. He'll start ringing that thing up first, counting how to count the ringer, tie the ringer for me, and then I sew the rest. We're sewing. Then once he started the first set, he'll tell me how many powders down. So powders means how many sets down before you put an eye on the net. So because the eye of the net will be the one that opening the other extension on the bottom.
What they call the kopu, the top part, that's the hardest part to do on a net. Once you start that and you get that right, you work your way down, and when you come down, you have to add more eye holes into the net. So they call that the ihus. Then you have the botsa, the bucket, then the plomo, the melting of the lead, how to divide the lead, how many lead into the net, how heavy do you want it. So it's all a lot of math into it also. And
it took me, I'll say close to almost a year to finish doing a 6-foot net.
To make a Talazan TL could take anywhere from 2 to 3 years to make one. The men didn't allow the kids to touch that net. So where we had to learn was the bigger net that only takes a few months to make, which is the Talazan Kitsu, Talazan Guili. Well, in those days it was cotton. They're mostly brown. The reason why fishermen like to use the brown is because it's about the same color as the seaweed, the grass. So when they throw it, it acts as you're covering the scoop with just the grass.
And that was a tedious task for these master net makers. But they would sit down and they would make their nets out of cotton and nylon. And even the one for what they call gadi, the one for the manyahak, it was all nylon and cotton.
What tools did they use to weave that?
They would make their own needles. Bamboo was the favorite way of making sewing needles.
My dad taught me how to make the materials with bamboo. And that's what he learned it from, or his father taught him, is to make the bamboo needle, the bamboo gauge. Now they're selling it, the plastic. I make my own from aluminum shutters. I'll make my own needles and gauge out of that because it's better than bamboo and better than plastic because it don't bend and it'll last longer. Remember getting my dad's material at that time it was Dedzima store where the old folks used to run it, and actually that was about the only place where we could find that. Then it went into nylon strings. That was better. The net was stronger, it lasts longer, and nylon was more available. Then now it come up to monofilament.
Later on, a machine took over and monofilament came by, and then that's when we were seeing the variety of nets that were made. But my first net, monofilament, came from Japan.
When did monofilament get introduced here?
I think maybe the 70s, late 70s. Monofilament didn't really take off because the problem with monofilament also is hard to stitch because it's a slippery, it slips. So it's better if you buy it factory made. Whereas the cotton type is a lot more easier to sew up. It's like rope.
The reason why now no fisherman makes it out of cotton or nylon is because when it gets wet, it's heavier. I have a net that was made by my father since 1957. So the net lasts. And those fishermen, when they make their net, they take care of it, they repair it, and they don't allow anybody else to touch it.
To start a new talaza, you need a needle, which I'm using right now, which is this. It's basically what holds all your line together. And it's very key important because without this, you're not going to be able to make the net. Second you need is what we call in Chamorro a Taza, which is your guide in English. It's this little plate here I'm holding. This is what creates the eye. And so whatever size this is half of what your eye is going to be. Of course, your fishing line, whether it be monofilament, nylon, it doesn't matter, whatever you're comfortable and you want to make. Then this is what I just use a shell. It's called a counterweight. And what this does is it really helps you when you first start your net, for example, because it gets really hard on the top to get into loop every eye because it's so clustered together. So what this is gonna do, it's a good tool. You just put this here. It just acts as a counterweight as you're sewing. So you can these be free. So what this is right here is you're making the bottom eye right here. See these knots here, how they're symmetrically lined on top of the Taza? That's what you want. You don't want anything up here and then one's down here. That's how you know the net is not symmetrically sewn. So as you can see, I go around, and I split in between the V, which is these two. Basically the top portion of that eye. And as I go down, you can see it's forming an 8. That's why we call it double figure 8. And you just lock, boom. And if you see right here, it's perfectly aligned. And you just keep doing that all the way through. And depending on, the type of line you're using as well, determines the knots you're gonna use. If it's too bulky, some people use a different style knot. How you determine if a good knot is you don't have to stretch your net that long. After you're done sewing, you have to stretch it. So what that does is it keeps its form. Normally I stretch the talaza for 2 weeks max, but this material sometimes just 5 days in the sun stretching. It's good to go.
You got the talaza manahak net, which is to catch the baby rabbitfish. Then you got the TL net. It can catch the EE and TL at the same time. And those nets stay in the reef area, no more than 2-3 feet off shoreline. Now the reef net, you got 2 types of net. Anywhere from 1 inch to 3 inch.
Manahak season is over, they put that net away. The TL comes out, they'll catch the TL. They might throw on the EE with the TL or the manahak to the TL, but my family, you got your specific net, that's what you use it for. The EE would be the 1 inch because they're bigger fish, so you have to have your EE net. Like you won't want to throw your kitsu net to a guili or a tataga because it will rip it. They're bigger, stronger fish. So it's the same concept with the manahak net. And imagine those little eye to repair, and the fishermen don't want to repair theirs. The guili, the tataga, the lagwa, the skipjack would be anywhere from a 4 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch to 6 inches more than enough. And you don't want too much of the 6 inch because if you get the smaller guili, what they call gepan or anaha, and you see a big screw and you won't catch it with the 6 inch. So that's why 4 inch is usually what they use.
The net making came when I started going to the outside, and you need a different type of net for fishing on the outside. When you go outside to the reef, you need anywhere from 4 inch to 6. I've seen even some 7 up to 9 inch eyes. Okay, and this is what I'm working on right here. This is a 5-inch eye. It's going to be a 10-foot net, and it's typically made for guili and tataga. The homemade guili nets, the purpose are to hold the massive schools. That's why 5 to 6-inch eye, you know. So once they hit that talaza, they can't move. You don't want the bigger game fish to be running and jumping. Once they get gilled in these 5 to 6-inch, they can't move. You cannot actually buy this at this eye and poundage of the line. You won't find it anywhere. You can only find 2-inch up to 3-inch eye at most stores you can go to. And with that, they're not tailored for the bigger fish. But you can still catch it, but it would just be too much damage.
And how many tests are you using on your line?
Nothing lower than 40 pounds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Why is
So
that?
40 to 80 pound tests I use.
Why that?
It's ideal for the strength. Anything lower than 40 pounds, they're gonna start snapping it. When you come across 8 to 12 pound guili, they just break it.
Okay, because they're struggling, right?
Yeah, yeah. And they're very radical fish.
You know, my dad's haole, but he knows how to throw talaga because of a lot of his friends are Chamorro, so that's where he learned to pick it up. So you just practice of try to make a real nice circle out of the net when you open it.
Mantiene talaga hulo, pues un polo dide gini ki lo pagamo, some sige dati pinilo mo, pues un babazi talaga, some chuli talta gini ki san mena, pues ati tayo yung dagot tayo gini.
You hold a net like here, you get so much to put around your right arm, your elbow, and then you collect so much in the bottom here with your left hand until you feel the weight of the net is pretty much balanced. Once the net feels balanced, then you start swinging the net back and forth, and then when you go forward, you try to let this portion go first. This is the heaviest part of the net that will go out, and then pretty much the group of net that you have on your left hand is just, your left hand is just a guide when you let the net out. It's just guiding it so you can open it up and try and get the circle that you want.
You have to master the rhythm. It's like dancing when you dance. So you use your upper body more than your lower. These hands, once you hold the net, it has to be very balanced. The two that goes out. Once you establish that rhythm, it's just, next will be your footing. If the net's made right, the net will always be a pancake.
How would you know that until after you get the net?
Well, that's the thing, you know, that's the thing. A lot of fellow people that talaga, they wouldn't know if they're not making a net, what to look for. A lot of times what happens is they'll buy it, and when they throw it, it's not opening right. So the way to determine that is you would get the net, lay it out on the ground flat. If there's no slack as you're opening it, that's a good sign. Now the next thing that would be a big concern is when it's laying down and it looks like a cone. That is another issue. So what that's telling you there is the net is not spaced right.
Utututuno, setiap bago na sakkan utututuno. May edakku jatu gogostungu bumaba. Maka deju ni somuna ehezu besangonyo ni sisiton praktika ra sesu dogolo tia bababagwi tia sesen babagwi ni tinatawag. Ti edi makat mazotti para mababan futmot. Tipo di menakatnya leleku edi put poron zotti za poron punta guatu gi Guåhan. Piot kololonya mas iparo only Guåhan.
Is it hard to throw?
Not really. It's the harder part of fishing is knowing how to spot the fish, how to tell what kind of fish. You'll be surprised, we don't see the fish most of the time. But just the movement of the water, the ripple, the shape of the ripple, you can tell what kind of fish. Like I said, my dad will bring me, look at that, look at that. I said, look at that, just look at the sand and look at the color of that. We can tell you what kind of fish it is. And 99% of the time, it is that fish. I've gone fishing where I tell a friend, throw that, that's sedzon. Throws it, it's sedzon. Then throw that, that's tiao. He throws it. Then he yells at me, Ton, here's one coming. I said, no, that's agwas, you don't want that. He goes, yeah, right. So he throws it in, Ton, it's agwas. I said, I told you. That's the mudlet.
You don't like mullet?
No, I like mullet. It's just that they're so fast. Out of that 100 and some pieces, he caught one. They're really fast.
EE is real simple, you know. When you look at EE on the surface of the water, they have a lot of real fine ripples on top of the water. If the water's calm, you can see the school coming. So it's not really that hard to spot a school of EE. It's not like if you're gonna spot TL. TL stays below the water surface, so it's harder to see the TL in the water if it's sunny or windy. I mean, with a polarized lens, you know, it makes you able to see in the water. You know, go down to the dirt side where you can see the fish. But nowadays, yeah, you know, it's polarized lens are sold, so makes it a lot easier for us to see the fish. But those days, it was just naked eye looking in the water.
Sa nigi istatao agogoftungo mongi guian za dili guana bana nigi ketu. Piana songan ketu apa babike ketu tu dili ni jigi. Pesu kekiatan afatan atan batu lu tu dili. Dekudara fano na atan ni ketu famakilo. Pes fejo asontis na. Jadi dumus papasu ni. Pes atan ni. Pes modnyo. Hasana zote jawa asu. Kalau nezi mereka kata waktu, pes Taza, pes kulana, pes guna tu dia mah Taza, tiu fan zotes, tahu guna pes kam Taza ni, sa ti tempo punya zatiu fan gasta temponya po fan zotes para size grono, hanan nangga ikat dumi po bali, guna panggil mandongos tahu guna biaya, zabulai bat dia zaman pusama. Za nigi na disti catamak dia la 5 ki catamak sa tatao jajawam za na lilistam pes esta ma foto gatu gima gila setti pago mananas tu manajan
Debi pasaj Debi non bismo saji siga na siga mo nan tatyo trong cái kispia ko man holum ko gaigi rai Long tunga na manggay lo gagi sanijang prestalo guano lili hujung loktin hago fondago talaza guano sinam up to gat pusunan laga kumasis pero fan hot tulum de disinong gat hago nun logo talaza.
You know, I know the areas here where they come in and where they go out and where they like to school, like up there. There's tons of fish up there, but it's rocky. But I will throw it in the rocks. I will not catch them all, but I will get some.
And when you're out on the reef, what I meant by out on the reef was the flat surface area where water, not over it, but what we call la masa. On this la masa is just a table where the fish is the water is no deeper than 2 inch to 6-8 inch back. Even a foot is still good. On the connet area, you know, the channel or the connet area, you know that's a door for the fish to come in and out. It's the same thing. As long as it's not rocky or too many crevices, you know, potholes in that area, or they got the atsukalaon, which is they call a pine rocks, or they even got the fire corals or the fern rocks. You don't want to throw on those kind of areas because those are the preserved areas. That's where the fish really eat. You want to bring it in closer to where it's more even and flat.
Why would a fisherman hesitate throwing in the rock?
The net, you know, to repair the net. I don't repair it, but when there's fish there, I try to, you know, delicately take it out of the rocks. You know, some get away. I don't chase after it. Whatever's in the net, I take whatever goes out. You're lucky. Next time I will get you.
February, March, April, okay, it's good to go talaza because all the seidun and kitsu are in the reef because they're fattening up and they got their larvae has to mature. Okay, so at the time they're here, they're all feeding, fattening up, and then the schools, males and females, will combine, and then they'll go out, and then you don't see them for the next 3 months. The only time you see them is after the Manyahak run, when all the juveniles start coming in. Then they start coming out from the deep to feed, but they're only lucky if you'll be able to find big schools in a month because they start fattening up and they're gone again.
I've learned from this uncle of mine, before you throw the net out at that fish, you look at the backside, because sometimes in the backside, maybe about 1.5 feet behind them, the bigger ones are on the back. And that's what you want to do, is aim for the bigger ones, because even though the small ones are in the front, and you go after that big ones there in the back, and you can reach, because they're maybe about, I'll say sometimes they're not even 2 feet from each other, or even 1 foot from each other. And if your net can reach that big ones out there, you know the small ones will run back where the big ones are.
Ang kumukwento sa naibigo ko na imigay niya na tita titendi para kid ikininya igwian malago tata para fo nene finuno mo ano adon sige komento slo izigi na mo na delinquente zo sa nutsuli talaga za fuego izigi mo na malalalad di zo lo yam ko atsoga iti so nya na izigi na rason na ililig niya sottesti za polo zo dadang kulo za malifa zo na nezi sotta zo dadang kulo za masya holzi na prohimo siniseda pat ponsoso da otro be sige ne lachu talo ne fuego la nayo chansa ne talaga ga gigo na jotti zo fuego do mai salogi zo na molingang sotta ne gaga sige seliko ay maga I learned it the hard way lo maulik sesto tungo na pago sige na nanay tati stisia na información para manatati za cosa que señalo que ma exisia na.
Have fishing methods changed over time?
Methods with the shore, no, they're seasonal, so if they're in, good. If they're not, you can't do anything about it. But now I notice that there are a lot more younger male or even females are casting net now. My daughter fished at Talazas. I taught her since she was like, what, 12, 13 years old. And she's just amazed the old men in Paugo Bay because she's a girl and she's so small and she knows what's a tiao passing by, what's an aguas passing by, and she'll throw only at the tiao.
I've seen a lot of women that were what they call talajera. Oh man, there's some pretty good ones. You know, even the women, if they were willing to get out there and learn traditional culture fishing, they were there. And especially for the gadi, the traditional culture gadi, tsunsulu, women were always there.